Welcome to episode 16 of the Truth in the Arena podcast, where we are speaking with sport coaches, performance coaches, and performance professionals from all around the world of sport. And we're talking about some of the values, principles, and leadership qualities that they value the most in their practice. And then at some point, we often transition the conversation towards how those same principles inform their outlook on social issues or political issues or other matters of the day. Today, we're very excited to have with us Coach Jim Malone. Jim is the owner of the Baseball Strength Academy and a longtime leader in the strength and conditioning field. He also currently serves as a consultant for Major League Baseball, USA Weightlifting. And throughout the course of over 3 decades in the field, Jim has been the head strength and conditioning coach for the Padres, the Mets, and the Pirates, and also been on the performance side for the Guardians, the Royals, and the Cardinals. Coach Jim has coached multiple Hall of Famers, multiple Cy Young winners, countless All-Stars, while also becoming a sought-after speaker and presenter in the field with tons and tons of recognized skin in the game. Jim, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
Thank you for the tremendous background that you shared with everybody.
Well, it's easy when you have a tremendous background because then I don't have to make anything up. I'm leaving things that you've done that are leaving out things that you've accomplished. So that makes my job very easy on that side. And we are going to jump right into it. And throughout the opening run of episodes, and particularly with coaches who have like the amount of experience that you have in the field, there tends to be an intrinsic motivation that keeps them going out and working with their athletes on the court, in the field, or in the gym, day after day, week after week, and year after year. And often that has to do as much with developing the human side and developing connections in addition to just working on the physical side with their athletes. So across all of the 3 decades that you have in the field, can you talk about some of the core values and principles that you consistently make an effort to try to develop in your athletes, and then also as a leader in the field, when possible, with your peers in the coaching field as well?
Yeah, I think, when it comes right down to it, it's the idea of service for me. I initially got into coaching because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And I thought it might be a nice bridge until maybe I figured that out. But once I was in it right away, I figured out pretty quick that was probably going to be where I stayed. I dabbled in a couple opportunities outside of coaching while I was still relatively young because there's a little bit of uncertainty and the financial insecurity that comes along with it. But I just kept coming back to it. And I think a lot of it was, number one, I love the idea of being part of something bigger. I love being a piece of that team ideal. And I'm comfortable being in the background of that. I think I went strength and conditioning because I wasn't fully prepared. I started off as a football coach who did strength and conditioning. I just wasn't prepared to chase the idea of being the boss and being the face of something. That's not really where I'm comfortable. And while I aspire as a strength conditioning coach now, I aspire to be the boss whenever possible, to be the director, to be the role model, to be the head of the department. You're still subordinate to the bigger picture, because no matter how fancy your title is as a strength conditioning or performance professional, you are an assistant coach to whoever that sport coach, the head coach or manager is. Yeah. And, I like being part of that background and helping prop up the true players in whatever you're trying to do. And those are the athletes. So, again, it's sort of the idea of like servant leadership in a sense, because I want to teach the athletes. I want to try to empower them to be the best that they can be. I want to see that confidence that grows, especially in younger athletes, that grows as they become more physically mature and they become sort of the trust in themselves to be able to go out there and do these things that are not easy to do and require a lot of grit and consistency to stay stay on it, as a modality that helps them in their performances, in whatever sport that they're doing. So that for me is a big part of it. And I'm not afraid to have hard conversations with the athletes when they're either unhappy um, or they're having a hard time sort of getting what we're trying to accomplish. But then it's the idea of working collaboratively with those athletes, especially at the professional level, because it's less about I'm the coach, you're the athlete, do as I say. It's really more, hey, I'm a resource for you because you are essentially your own business entity, and how can I help you maximize your opportunity to perform and earn, sort of in the moment, but also over the longevity of your career? Because really, what we're doing as performance professionals is also, besides performance, we're trying to help create some longevity. And obviously, the longer they can earn, the better off they are. And there's a lot of satisfaction in that. Be nice if there was a little more trickle down economics that helped us as coaches. But and again, I know that, look, there are a lot of people in our field that are doing really, really well. It's just traditionally, I ended up choosing a little bit poorly. I love MLB and I've really grown to love the game, but they do not reward the individuals in our role like the NFL or major colleges do. So, but again, I think, and having listened to a few of these podcasts that you've done, which I think are great, and also just in general the conversations that we have, we don't end up getting into this. We're not really in this for the money. That's a nice byproduct, and some of the amenities and sort of the accoutrements that come with it are fantastic, and it's fun to be part of, and it's fun to be around, and you can get caught up in that a little bit. But in the end, if you're coaching for the right reasons, you're doing it for very little, very often. And
Right.
and if you love it, that doesn't matter. That's the reward in itself.
Absolutely. And you mentioned some important qualities there in terms of servant leadership and wanting to be part of something bigger and not necessarily wanting to be the face of the organization. And that is, quality teams and quality organizations are full of people who are all pulling the rope in the same direction that way. And then it's also important to develop, levels of internal leadership within it. So there isn't just one at the top and then one level below. So every successful organization has levels of leadership within it. And you mentioned, wanting to be at that director level, but with somebody above you. For teams, what are some ways that you've seen to develop that kind of internal leadership? And I know that you've worked with some amazing leaders, some of my all-time favorite baseball players, and Trevor Hoffman and Adrian Gonzales, just to name a few. So what are some of the qualities those internal leaders embody? And do you have any suggestions for coaches who are looking to develop that quality of internal leadership in whatever sports team that they're coaching with?
Yeah, I think, and a lot of it I think becomes personality specific, really. So just using Trevor and Adrian as examples, being a couple of your favorite guys and guys who I worked with for some time and had the pleasure and the honor of working with and really getting to know. um, they're really more quiet leaders.
Mhm.
They are not the guys that are um, coming into the clubhouse after a tough loss or a big win and vocalizing things. They are the guys that just are quietly going about their business and become the model of consistency, and the model that consistency very fortunately for them, to go along with their talent level, turned into outstanding careers, statistically and from an accomplishment standpoint. So they become the evidence of their model. Now, of course, and there are other athletes along the way that are more vocal. And I
Mm.
think it's the best leaders are the ones that know how to sort of dose that out and can rise up to whatever the circumstance dictates. And they're not out there with some sort of like phony, false rah rah, because that tends to be very uh, that tends to come and go pretty quick.
Mm.
And if it's not sort of backed up with consistency in action, it doesn't become very it's not very foundational from a leadership standpoint, for athletes or front offices or coaches either. I think, and again, you're coming from football where it's a much more, sort of regimented and schedule, and the not so much that it's the coach athlete hierarchy, but it's just a different mentality. And baseball is much more casual. It's the idea that, we have to come and do this. We're doing this every day. So it's hard to you don't want to get too high. You don't want to get too low, and just try to hunt for the consistency. And that more often than not, if you're trying to come out, come out 6 out of 10 times at the end of the year, you're going to be in really good shape. And I think that philosophy, I mean, everybody, and no matter what their job or what they're in, right? It's, you're in it every day, whether you're a fireman, whether you're an insurance salesman, whatever, like there has to be some consistency and some like sort of standards that you just need to sort of bear down and get comfortable doing on a daily basis, knowing that, you don't want the pendulum to swing too far one direction or the other. You hope for your wins. You hope your wins outweigh the losses or the bad days. I think it's a little bit like gambling. My dad was a card player, and I think any big gambler you talk to, they don't remember the wins, they remember the beats. And so you're trying to stack the little wins on a daily basis. And for us, a lot of times that's building relationships. You're trying to win at building relationships, and then trying to empower those athletes that you have the relationships to be the best version of themselves.
No, so one of the reasons why I think baseball often gets used as like a metaphor for life is because of the reason that you mentioned, that it's a daily thing, and it's not necessarily what you do in any one moment. It's the 162 game season, and you can't necessarily come out cranked up to volume 11 every single day. You have to find that middle ground that you talked about. You have to find that consistency that you talked about and stack up each of those little wins. And one of the things that kind of rang to me is that as you were talking about the qualities that you saw in some of those leaders, is that it really came down to authenticity and, being who they are as people and being the kind of voice that came naturally to them. And so, looking a little bit at some of those qualities of authenticity and consistency and stacking little wins, how do some of those things that you find important in the leadership side on the sports world also translate to the types of leaders and the types of policy positions that maybe you respond to in either the social realm or on the political side?
Well, again, I think it's consistency, and unfortunately, I think sometimes the consistency can be not great.
Right.
And I guess on one hand, if you want to make the argument that people are showing you who they are on a consistent basis, it just doesn't necessarily mean it's always the best kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
But true leaders, in certainly across all domains, have to lead everybody in their stead. If Trevor Hoffman, even if Hoffy was really vocal, even if he was a little bit more of a high energy guy. Now, look, don't mistake me. I'm not saying he didn't. He brought it when Hell's Bells played and he came out. His temperature was high. But that didn't manifest itself obviously in being sort of effusive in the way he displayed it. It was just time to compete. But he wasn't the leader for just the pitchers on the San Diego Padres or the Milwaukee Brewers at the end of his career. Adrian Gonzales was not the leader for just the position players. If you're the GM of the organization, you're not just the leader for the baseball operation. If you're the team president of the organization, you're not necessarily just the leader for the baseball operation side. You're also the leader for the business operation side. And if we start to stretch the boundaries and we start talking about the political arena, you may have been elected by your political party supporters, but you're not leading half the country. And you also have to remember that good leaders know how to. There's got to be a give and a take. We just really, it's unfortunate that things have become so partisan. And I'm not necessarily advocating for either side right now, but I think it's just with the 10% at the two extremes in the political arena have really made it difficult for the middle 80%. Because I think a lot of us, I think that the average people aren't necessarily ready or willing to just get up there and start screaming at the top of their lungs about stuff. It's kind of the 10% on either end that tend to be very myopic in their points of view, that make it really difficult for everybody else. And they pull some of the fence sitters that are sort of that next, standard deviation. If we start talking about sort of the center, right, how many standard deviations away? I think right now we're 2 and 3 standard deviations from the middle, and the middle people are paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
But leaders have to remember, okay, it's okay to understand what got them there, but they still have a responsibility to everybody under them. And if that's in a business, it's the CEO should also care about the person cleaning the toilets and their quality of life and what they're doing and how can they advance beyond that. If it's in sport, you're the GM, you still care about the kid in low A ball. In the NFL, if you still care about the 8th guy or the 12th guy on the practice squad, whatever that number is these days. And politics, you should still care. You still have to care about the quality of an opportunity of life that may be with the people that didn't necessarily support you getting to where you're getting to where you're at.
No, exactly. And one of the things that as you continue to talk about consistency and the ability to lead everybody, no matter what the relationship is to you, both of those things are kind of rooted in honesty. And if you are consistently honest, then you can usually connect with people who have different ideas than you, different circumstances than you. And honesty is one of the foundations for your ability to connect with everybody as a leader. And for me, one of the biggest disappointments over the last handful of years is how, as a society, we've kind of accepted and normalized dishonesty to a degree that I don't think has been the case in other eras. And yes, there have always been, stereotypical politicians speaking out of both sides of their mouth and salesmen who will say whatever it is they need to say to make a sale. But I think our society's permission structures for people lying to us have gotten to a point where we just kind of let that wash over us versus pushing back when we hear somebody lying to our faces. And as coaches, one of the things we need to do is we need to be honest. We need, like you've said, you need to be honest with your athletes. You need to be able to hold them accountable. You need to be able to tell them exactly what it is that they need. So from the coaching side, do you see any role for coaches in terms of pushing the permission structures back to where people need to actually be honest in their regular life, either as political leaders or as coaching leaders?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's people. I think too many people shy away from difficult conversations, and having an honest conversation can be uncomfortable. It, if I've got a GM, if I've got someone that I answer to, and they're just telling me that I'm doing a great job, I'm doing a great job, I'm doing a great job, and then a contract renewal time, they're like, okay, we're not going to renew your contract. Well, why not? And you get a reason, and it was something that could have been addressed beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Then that GM, that leader, hasn't done me or anybody the service that they should have, because not only did you leave the person twisting in the wind, but really as a byproduct of that, you didn't help your team. Hey, we keep, why do we keep having hamstring issues? And then maybe get into a conversation and pull in some other people, have a collaborative discussion. But rather than worry about trying to hurt somebody's feelings, or maybe it's just that you don't like the person, or you don't connect with the person. And that's fine too. That's a different conversation. But if you're not being honest and trying to get to the root of a problem, and the people that suffer, the byproduct of that is that your team, right, who you're really all supposed to be there to buoy up and support, and put a product on the field, you've hurt your team. And I think that, again, it's the same thing. I think our team right now, unfortunately, our country is being hurt because there's so much divisiveness, not diversive, divisiveness that people get closed off to having rational and reasonable conversations, especially in a day where you can just kind of get out there and throw it, starts just literally throwing like a monkey throwing shit at the walls. It doesn't, there's so little consequence for it, have an honest conversation. Sadly, I think a lot of it is to divert, the lying is to divert attention from more meaningful things. I mean, is 100% honesty all the time the best way to be? Well, no, you can make the argument, no, right? Little white lies. The problem is when the boundaries start getting stretched and then the lines start getting blurred, and then it becomes, well, you lied about this, so it's okay to lie about that. I think there are degrees, just like anything, the degree of severity, degree of consequence. What's the consequence? And that we don't have people setting good examples. And it makes it easier, especially for the people on fences. It makes it easier for them to rationalize not giving their best efforts, their best societal efforts, if they are trying to use it as an excuse because, well, so and so wasn't truthful about this, so why should I be truthful about what we're talking about?
And when you talk about some of the hard conversations and the honesty, some of that also leads into another topic that I want to talk about, which is meritocracy. And hard conversations are often about like finding those kind of gradations of things, and it's not always easy to tell an athlete that, hey, the reason why you're not playing is there just happen to be some people who are better at you right now, and it's hard to get to that point. And those kinds of honest conversations are things that coaches have to be able to have with their athletes in order for them to grow and in order for them to understand like their circumstances on any team. You just can't whitewash things for people. And we are in a field that, number one, believes or should believe in a true meritocracy, that you're always trying to put the best people in the best positions in order to win. And we are also in a field that tends to lean conservatively in terms of its political beliefs. And a longtime political belief on the conservative side has always been that of true meritocracy, and you rise and fall on your own merits. Yet, that also seems to be something that we're kind of swinging away from. And we see people in positions of authority and positions of power and positions that have a great deal of responsibility for things that they don't actually have any skin in that game, and they don't have any expertise in that field. And they did not do anything to earn those jobs other than perhaps be persuasive on TV and be loyal. What do you think from, again, like the long-time coaching side and somebody who sits in that kind of political middle, what do you think of the current role of demanding meritocracy among us in the coaching field?
Yeah, I mean, right, meritocracy is earned, right? It's opportunities earned. And in the world of sport, in the world of especially professional sport, right, where it does come down to wins and losses, because wins and losses are dollars and cents. You can have, you've got the guys that are career AA and AAA guys that do everything right, everything. And they're just not quite at the bottom when it comes to their actual skill and talent level. They're just not quite good enough. Like those are the guys that a good GM, a good front office will say, when an opportunity arises to be the 26th guy, 26 now, right? 26th guy on the roster, that the guy can get his cup of coffee in the big leagues, right? Unfortunately, that's a little harder to do these days. If you talk about the college level, okay, we're up by 30, let's give someone a chance to play because they do everything right.
Right.
The flip side of that is the uber talent that just does nothing right, but he still helps the team win. And so he's going to play. He's probably going to play almost regardless. And that's when you start getting into that gray area about what kind of damage, potential damage is that individual doing to the team dynamic. That I think is where you need other people, or you need other athletes, other players on those rosters to help tamp that down and sort of put a governor on the outliers so that come game time, yeah, they can go play, but you're not going to let the athletes take care of making sure that he doesn't disrupt the rest of the team. You start getting into the into the other world, right? The real world. It's not always that cut and dry, right? I've always thought that good leaders fortify their, recognize, have good enough self-awareness to recognize their shortcomings, and they fortify what they're trying to do with people that can help fill those gaps. I find it very ironic that the current political landscape has people rallying against the idea of diversity and the idea of being inclusive. And then on the flip side of that, they're plugging people into positions, high-powered decision-making positions that have absolutely zero right to be there. It would be like if Chris Young, who's the president of the Texas Rangers, grabbed me and said, well, you know what? I want someone, I just need you to be there and kind of run things for me. And we have a good relationship and you know enough about baseball that I'm going to make you the GM. Well, I'm not qualified to be the GM. Right. And I think it would take an incredible amount of self-discipline to say no to that. No, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to help you out there. I'm not going to make things better for you. So I'm going to say no, but I'll pay you $3 million. Yeesh, I might have a hard time saying no, right? Should I be in that GM spot? Probably not, but I might still say yes because it's going to make me better off in the long run. And I think there's an element of that, but really I think it's just more about there's an unfortunate lack of true self-confidence and trust right now in the political arena. And again, that's not to say it doesn't happen on both sides, but when you've been coaching a long time and you've been subjected to a lot of ethnic and socioeconomic diversity, it's hard. I think it should really give you a better lens onto what sort of like the athletic compared to the real world. You've had some, if you've been coaching long enough across a few different domains, different sports, you've had real exposure to people that have had really great lives their entire lives and to other people that have not had great lives. And I think just like anything, your life experiences are going to come into play. I think, I would just not say I was conservative to the level that it's discussed the way it's painted today, but I would say I was, I had a very conservative lean in my younger years because it just felt like things are very black and white. Like, to your point, meritocracy, work hard, earn it, and get there. Some social programs I don't get, they don't care. They're not doing it. They're not contributing to society. Why are we giving them money? It's just not that cut and dry. I think as you get older, you'd like to think that you just become a little bit more open, a little more empathetic. And I think life experiences, like my dad was a firefighter. So I remember in the early 70s as a kid when the idea of diversity and equity, were being played into the Buffalo Fire Department where I grew up. And I was young, 5, 6 years old, 7 years old, but you still remember sort of the temperature of it. And I would not say my dad was very vocal about it because he was not a very vocal person to begin with, but he probably didn't love it. And that didn't make my dad a racist. I think that, the argument about diversity and equity, right, is, you want to have someone that's qualified doing the job, right? Well, okay, but biases, we all have biases. And if two things are equal, is it wrong to pick someone based on opportunity I don't know. I think that's a bigger argument than I'm willing to take on. But I think you should have to think long and hard about because that advancement and that opportunity could really make a difference a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. I think the idea is we're supposed to be trying to break down barriers, and we're all human, and colors of skins, ethnicity, really, it's exhausting. It's just exhausting. And in the end, it just doesn't feel like it just doesn't feel like it's a good job is being done. Things are a bit the advent of social media, and there's so much more awareness of like everything that's out there. It's the idea of information versus knowledge. There's just so much out there. It can be so overwhelming, and you end up down a rabbit hole, and it's so there's too much theater involved these days. It's too performative, and it's really to just. And again, I think in the end, a lot of it is just to divert attention. It's like the red laser with a cat, right? Trying to make sure the cat stays away from the baby on the floor, right? Just shoot the red laser over there, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I'm giving a good answer, but it's just it comes back to the idea of the leadership qualities that we talked about earlier. Some people can get up there and can be really dynamic, and it can be substantial, and they can get up. Other people, there's a difference between saying something and having something to say, or having to say something versus having something to say. Those are two very different things. And it's just not. It just has not been helpful. It's not helping the divide. The role of a leader is to bring people together, and that's not happening now.
Right.
Honestly, I would vote for Nick Saban to be president of the United States tomorrow. And I don't know what his political. I'm sure Nick's very conservative. Coach Saban's very conservative, but he knows a thing or two about building a successful team and empowering people around and building leaders.
Right.
That's the other thing about leadership. The role is, the roles of leaders to build other leaders. It's not just to pontificate and be boss. And that's the difference between bosses and leadership. It's just, it's really a hard time to, it's a tough time. And again, I think we're all shaped, by our experiences and, the lens looking through things as a coach and the exposures I've had. And also when you think about like personal situations and, loss and what you've been through, it really changes the lens that you look through. But yeah, opportunities, if you work hard, yes, you should be rewarded. I just feel like across a lot of domains, there's sort of too much suppression. There's just too much. The gap, the income gap, the wealth gap is massive. The idea of leadership, is too many people get into leadership positions or positions of power, and they are just trying to amass as much as they can for themselves. And talking about the CEO of a major company is apolitical, but statistics are out there. What's the average CEO pay compared to the average worker pay compared to 20, 30, 40 years ago? There's that much wealth out there within a company. Like, why is it such a bad idea to provide some equity or stake for the people that are actually doing, carrying the load? And that's certainly not to say CEOs and leaders aren't important, because they are. They're given direction, they're putting in policy, but they're not doing it all by themselves. I don't know. I'm a little all over the map on that answer, but
That's all right. There's some very, very important points there. Number one that I really like is just the idea that sports bring together people who would not normally be brought together. And that's one of the real values of sport and across whatever level you coach, whether it's at the youth side, the high school side, college, you do end up with people who if they were not playing sports, would not interact with each other. But then because they do, they have to learn to work together to a common end. And that's a really important thing that comes from sport. And another really important point that you make in terms of evaluating somebody's credibility, one way to do so is to look at who they've developed as leaders underneath them. So you don't really need to know necessarily everything about Nick Saban's beliefs. You can look at all of the people who have elevated to other leaderships beneath him, and his coaching tree is so expansive that you can say this is somebody who's doing a lot of things right in his life, and I can kind of validate that from just looking at that coaching tree that he's created. And that last answer leads a little bit into the next topic, and you were talking a little bit about the current attacks on diversity and equity and inclusion and how that has been carried out, and a lot of that's been done in an online fashion. And as coaches, one of the things that we look to do is to take care of our athletes' health and lifestyle, and we're looking at ways that they can make sure that they're getting proper sleep, getting proper nutrition, having good recovery habits. And then another element of that is having like a healthy media diet, both in terms of the way that they're interacting with social media in ways that are hopefully not obsessive or ways that are not destructive just on the mental health side, but then also you mentioned, the big difference between information versus knowledge and having something to say versus just saying things. So, in terms of your own media diet, what are some of your personal practices for being on top of the things you want to be on top of? And do you have any suggestions for coaches or athletes to maintain a healthy media diet?
True. Yeah, it's such a tough landscape these days. And I'm just as guilty as a lot of people, right? It's like little microbytes of information and,
Mhm.
algorithms that are skewing, points of view and not giving us um, giving us a very a 30-foot view versus a 30,000-foot view of things that are going on. Um, for me, I just think it comes down to a lot of I try to be open-minded and be a critical thinker as best I can, and I'm not flawless at that. Um, I've certainly I've voiced some opinions when I kind of get to a breaking point on a topic. I've tried to be less sort of I try to be a little less political. And first of all, I stink at social media to begin with. I'm not good at it. I'm not good at, and I was listening when you talked about Missy, um, like how much she hates it, and she does I think she does a great job
Mhm.
at it. I am so as I'm trying to get into sort of more the private sector, I'm so not comfortable promoting what I think I have to offer athletes and
Mhm.
parents that I'm really having a hard time digesting it. I might need to talk to her and
Oh yeah,
to her point, pay her as a resource, right? So
right.
I don't make the bad list of her 5 and 5, the people that call and never hear from again. And I don't know Missy well. We have connected on, so we have some life experiences that are some difficult life experiences
Mhm.
that we share. And so we connected a little bit on that. And I think she does a phenomenal job. Um, but like, again, I am not a fan of our president right now.
Mhm.
And it's the thing is I get where some of the like this where these arguments stem from on both ends, right? Open borders, not good. Doing a better job of sort of trying to control that type of situation, no doubt, needs to be done. Are there bad people that have come into this country because of that? I'm quite sure there have. Statistically, there's no way. Um, I think the way that issue is being solved right now is sad and a little bit globally embarrassing,
Mhm.
um, because there is no doubt that some of these people, these bullies that they're running out there, are not trained in law enforcement. And this is a shotgun versus scalpel approach, and it's not good. And all it's doing is creating more divisiveness. Okay. You know, on the conservative side, right? I get that. I get that we can't just be pouring money. It's hard to justify giving money to people without some sort of responsibility to, in a sense, earn it. I think some social programs could use some revamping. Like, there is enough to do in this world, in this country, that if you are on some sort of social assistance, that you can. I think that the majority of people out there would be, if they have not been given great opportunities or are not in great socioeconomic shape, that you can create a little bit, actually some empowerment to have in a way to find a way to do better with how that money is doled out and the responsibility for receiving that money is handled. And those are bigger questions. Like, those aren't for me to solve. Those are for smart people, socioeconomic people to figure out. So I get it. I understand the idea of, in the sense of making the country a manufacturing giant again. But it's the situation we're in now is decades in the making, where manufacturing within the boundaries of our country has been outsourced overseas in the efforts to create greater profit margins. And now we have fewer opportunities like that. We become more of a service-oriented country, and there's only so much to serve, I think, in my opinion. And I can't back that up with statistics, but the idea of, like, trying to bring more manufacturing back to the U.S. is a great idea. I think that's phenomenal. But it's not going to happen in 6 months. It's not going to happen in a 4-year term. And I have not, frankly, personally, I have not seen a good plan. It's great to just say it and to write an executive order, but this isn't Sim City. A factory doesn't pop up because you want it to pop up. And the idea of, like, training grounds and incentive, right? I get the idea of incentive. I get, in theory, the idea of, like, maybe why a tariff should help drive manufacturing back to the U.S. But there are historical examples, right? The Smoot, I forget.
Ollie.
Yes, yeah. That it hasn't worked. So, you're following a blueprint for something that hasn't worked. But, again, we have someone in the big chair that has a history of things not working. Right. And I don't want to hear about how much money he's got. That's not a demonstration of anything. That's a byproduct. That's a byproduct of things. You think about how that family wealth was earned, and it's not a great history. And on the flip side, you can make an argument of, like, well, how was the Kennedy money all earned, right? Bootlegging and, whatever other illicit activities were going on. But, you like to make a point, like, if you have an opportunity to make something better out of your background, and it has not happened. And people, he's an individual who has shown us who he is for decades. And if you're from New York, liberal state, liberal city, there's a history there. And I don't know how that, it strikes me as, it's so hard to wrap my head around the idea that so many people think that that's okay. Like, it's okay, like to consistently screw people over and to talk. There's no civility or honor or sense of community in this country right now. And it's exhausting. And as a coach, when we talk about team and the greater mission and the greater good, that's really hard to sort of coexist with.
Mhm.
And again, the world of pro sports, like the concepts of sport, whether it's pro or amateur or collegiate or high school, right, are there's a lot of commonality in that. But kids, 12-year-olds, parents are doing things with 12-year-olds hoping that their kid is going to be the one that signs a $150 million contract 15 years and 20 years from now. And statistically, it's just against you. Like, participating in sports should be an opportunity to be a part of something bigger. And some of those lessons should translate into the idea of like how we live amongst each other in our neighborhoods, in our cities, in our states, and in our regions, and then in our countries. It's it's really easy to romanticize. You could talk about theoretically the way the Native Americans lived, and that everybody had responsibility, and the strong took care of the weak. But we also know that there were other tribes out there that were more warlike and aggressive, and and subjected the weaker tribes to slavery. And we can think about some of the honorable things that you see in some of the Asian cultures in Japan. And we know that there's also the feudal system, and that there were a lot of people that were very poor there. And but I think we've romanticized. I think what we've become a victim of is we've romanticized this American dream idea, and I think it's still very much there. And I still think we are the greatest country in the world. I think that as far as opportunity, but boy, it is really being. I just really feel like it's being tainted, and there's no one, far right or far left, that isn't a little bit to blame for that. And until the middle really rises up, and some common sense and the idea of community starts taking place, we're in a bad spot. I don't have kids, and I wish that I did. I got married late, and it just wasn't in the cards for us. And but it's kind of a sad thing to say that I'm a little bit glad. We grew up, and you see things like Star Trek when we were kids, right? And the idea of it's this global federation, and the Federation of Planets, United Federation of Planets, and it doesn't matter what ethnicity you are, what color you are, right? You're all part of this great thing. And we're a lot closer to the movies The Road and the Book of Eli than we are to the idea of Star Trek in a global world. And it's sad, and we're doing that to ourselves. And the byproduct of that is too, like, just get started on the whole controversy about climate change, and the effect that that's having. And you talk about like health things, and like how we're literally, when you compare to what's happening here from a food standpoint to Europe, to other countries out there, it's like, it's unfathomable to think like some of the things that are allowed. And it's just become this horrible vicious cycle. And I think a lot of it is because of greed, and the machine, the big machines that are in place to just keep feeding off of each other, and sort of keep everybody in this horrible hamster wheel of life. And I don't like to talk like I'm painting this really dark picture, but sometimes it's hard. If you really put some thought behind it, it's kind of hard to think that like treatments over cures, because treatments over cures, cheap and poisonous versus healthy. It's just hard. It's just hard.
Right. And in there, you mentioned a couple of things that really kind of lead towards the last question I was going to ask. And you mentioned that you do still believe that, though romanticized and maybe we've gotten away from it a little bit, there still is that American dream that is viable, and it is still a real thing. But at the same time, we're lacking that sense of honor, that sense of community that brings people together. And one of the questions that I like to ask the guests is, what is your definition of patriotism, which is kind of where you're getting at with both of those statements there. And it's been interesting because every guest has a different definition of patriotism, which is essential, but we should have different views on these kinds of things. And then within that, Obviously, you don't need to solve it in these next couple of minutes, but do you have any ideas of what some of the shared values can be to just start making a few of the steps to getting back to that idea of the shared sense of honor, the shared sense of community that will allow people to kind of start taking some of those steps so that we're heading more in the Star Trek direction and less in the road direction?
Um, I think, look, if you look at the big, I think you look at the big picture, our country in theory should be like a big family.
Hmm.
And I think if you love, if in the family situation, if you love a sibling, if you love a child, if you love a parent, if you love an aunt and uncle, that, um, the love can be unconditional, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be critical. There
Mhm.
can't be constructive and hard conversations um, within the family situation. I think it just has to be applied to the bigger picture. So I think patriotism is, look, I love our country. Like, you want to say because I've been critical of the president, you want to say that I've been, because I've been critical of other past presidents too, as I'm sure a lot of people have. But you
Mhm.
didn't have a social media platform to voice that criticism, right? And because of the transparency of social media, like, you know, there has been plenty of shady things in the last, but on the business side and the political side for decades. It's just now everybody sees it or is more aware of it. Or,
Mhm.
a mountain becomes a molehill because of the attention that's given to it. So, you know, patriotism is loving your country enough to be critical about it because of the ideal, because of the idea that, for us to be the best, for us to be, quote, the greatest country in the world or one of the greatest countries in the world, it's, you're great by how you're a good brother by, you know, or a good parent by loving your siblings enough to be critical about it and help redirect them if they are on a dangerous path. And I
Mhm.
think we're in a position right now that we're on a dangerous path. The divisiveness is just it's sad. It's so sad that we've allowed the two extremes to bring us to get us to this to the. I mean, it is a boiling point. This is a scary place. This is the kind of thing when we were younger, right? Think about it, Nate. You'd see some of these things that are happening these days happening in other countries decades ago when it would be on the news when
Right.
when the news was very apolitical and just reporting the facts, and there was less there were less fewer there was less, at least the sense that there was less of an agenda
Mhm.
behind the reporting, and you'd see troops and tanks and violence in these countries. And to think that that's happening in 2025 in our own country is is besides being a little bit scary, is sad and shameful.
Mhm.
um so being a patriot is loving your country enough to be critical about it. And the only way that everybody, really the only way the true middle 70 to 80%, 60 to 80%, try to pull the fence sitters back to the common good, is to get out there and vote. I mean, I think it's the biggest criticism right now of our political world is that I think that the good people and the people that are out there that have good ideas about how to do this, about how to pull everybody sort of back to the middle and the idea of the common ground and the common good, is that they just don't want to subject themselves to being attacked on both. Now you're the monkey in the middle and you're getting beat up on both sides,
Mhm.
right? And that's, what sensible person wants to do that? I mean, you have to be able to take on. It's going to take it. It we're in a place that it's going to take some really strong and selfless people that have to step up and try to get the message to the middle of this country, to the everyday person, and pull things back to really rise up and be what we have been in the past and I think are still capable of. So that's, I, Coach Tony, Coach Holler had talked about, he'd love to see more coaches get into politics. I agree. I mean, I don't think I have the stomach for it because I'm not going to tolerate someone talking to me the way people talk to each other now. And they just talk, they do it thinking that there's no consequence for it. I have stood up for myself in the professional realm a couple of times, and I paid the price for it, and that's fine. There are certain things that I didn't agree with and didn't go along with. But I've also told young coaches that by not having children and also not getting married until I was late, I was able to be a little bit more cavalier and kind of draw my line in the sand, what I thought was appropriate and right from a professional standpoint, what I was or wasn't going to be a part of. And I think that, some good people out there that could be real difference makers are going to have a hard time jumping into this arena because I don't think that they see, I don't think that their cost to benefit ratio at this point is not, it's not working in the favor of the majority, unfortunately.
Right.
Because they're just put in when you're getting, punched in the face and then, kidney punched in the back by the other side, two people that you're just literally, if you got out of the way, that they'd be fighting each other now, but you're become the focal of that anger and angst. It's just, too many good people are unwilling to do it.
Right.
And I don't blame them. I mean, I'm back in Buffalo right now, and I think about like, oh, can I be a difference maker? But I don't see, I don't see people rallying behind me because I'm going to end up pissing off the two extreme ends. Like It would be really, so I don't know, just the definition of the political parties. It's not helpful. It's just not helpful. They get painted with such a broad brush. There's so much more gray than there is black and white that we're just not in a good spot, and it's hard and it's sad. I think that answered more of the first part of your question. I forgot kind of what the second half of the question was.
No, I think you got to something very important there, because I do agree with you very much that there's an effort to make the discourse so unpleasant and the service so unpleasant that people who may otherwise want to engage in the discourse or maybe want to serve, they opt out of it. And that then allows a void so that the people who do go into those positions and who do dominate the discourse are the ones who are either financially motivated or maybe a little bit fanatical on the sides, and they've got a different level of motivation than the people who may be doing it for what we would consider the patriotic or the right reasons. And really appreciate you coming on. And one of the things that I'm really going to take away from this discussion is how important that ability to have hard conversations is, both from a leadership standpoint and as just members of our society and members of the American people. So it's really important to be able to step up and have those kinds of hard conversations. None of these are the easiest things in the world to do, but we also mentioned a little bit about permission structures earlier, and hopefully each one of these hard conversations nudges the permission structure a little bit more towards being able to sit down and speak honestly about some of the things that we think matter, both in our role as sport coaches and then also in our role as citizens of the country. So, Jim, thank you very, very much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me. I hope it's helpful in a little way to somebody out there.
Absolutely. Very much so. Thanks again.
Okay.